Ironically enough, a telephone call set into motion one of the most infamous, one of the absolute worst, one of the most important video games of all time. In 1982, the extraterrestrial had captured the hearts of the child in all of us, and subsequently went on to capture the #1 spot in box office history, surpassing Titanics like Jaws and Star Wars. With the video game industry in its prime, it was only natural to cash in. Atari, now headed by Ray Kassar and a corporate cluster of money-grubbing executives, acquired the rights to make an adaptation of Spielberg's celebrated classic, and on July 27th, a 2600 cart of E.T. was commissioned for creation, as a guy called Howard Scott Warshaw agreed to develop the game in time for the holiday rush. There was one problem. In order to meet that deadline, E.T. had to be ready to roll in just under 6 weeks. Let me say that again, 6 weeks. The monumental task was a challenge that Warshaw was warming up to, coming off of fantastic Atari games like Yar's Revenge and Raiders of the Lost Ark, another Spielberg adaptation. But the development cycle of those games had been upwards to half a year, and despite his best efforts, this new undertaking was an impossible one that left the same kids around the world who had wept tears in the movie theaters crying in their living rooms for quite different reasons. The game was abysmal. Apart from a decent title menu, the monotonous gameplay was ridiculously boring. The idea was you're supposed to scavenge a bunch of craters for pieces of a telephone, to what else but phone home. To spare the superfluity of a rambling review, here's the routine. You move around, you fall in pits at random, E.T. gets his head hooked by some invisible noose, you fly up out of the pit, but oh no, you fell back down, you gotta get back up, you move around the screen some more, you watch out for those FBI agents, they'll grab you and take you to jail, you fall in half a dozen more pits until you find a phone piece. Oh gee, redundancy rinsed and repeated. Despite sucking hard and drawing critical ire, it should be no surprise that E.T. nonetheless sold over 1 million copies in the winter of '82, ultimately becoming one of the top sellers for the Atari 2600. The license sold itself, and Atari knew as much. It was that false sense of security that nothing could burst their bubble that led them to believe they could continually get away with distributing dreadful product and no one would bat an eyelash. Word got around from the kids who would have rather gotten a lump of coal in their stockings that Christmas, and millions of unsold carts would end up, as folklore has it, dumped in a New Mexican landfill. And what a great symbol, a landfill, because that's where the industry was heading. E.T., contrary to popular belief, did not single-handedly bring down the American video game business, but it did act as a huge catalyst. It was one of the biggest disappointments ever. It was the one that people remembered. It was the one to lose consumer confidence in gaming. It was also the blueprint for generations of bad movie-to-game adaptations. The idea that the license, not the content behind the cover, is what makes money. But what about the man, the designer who on July 27th got the go-ahead to produce this ill-fated title? Warshaw will forever be linked with the debacle, but not necessarily blamed for it. Most have pardoned his failure on account for the laughingly ludicrous time frame he was given. But come on, man, couldn't you just have taken an action scene from the movie, like riding a bicycle away from cops? Even Spielberg, a pretty big gamer, had been skeptical of Warshaw's contrived concept, preferring a default game scenario like Pac-Man. Warshaw commissioned via telephone to design E.T. for the Atari 2600, July 27th, 1982, this dark day in gaming.